Alright, so I think it's time to go ahead and have at it with this clock there on the 1950 Buick. There's actually quite a bit of internet documentation out there if you look for it on how to repair these clocks and what to do with them. For some reason, nobody's showing any videos about how to actually get them out of the vehicle. I can see from pictures, if you go to buy one of these clocks on eBay, that there's definitely a couple of tabs sticking off of them there that I think is just going to wind up being a bolt, nut and bolt type of attachment on there. There's also reference to the, of course, the power going to it. And then I'm going to guess the grounding is probably through the screws to the body, probably. But let's actually find out what we have to do to get this out. Take the clock out and see if we can get 6 volts to the power supply, and if we have 6 volts going to the power supply, then figure out why the clock isn't running. The usual culprit is just age of oil and goo. People will oil them and do different things with them, and the regular oils over a period of time set up and become practically as solid and nothing can move. But anyway, let's get to it. See if I can do it just from underneath the dash here, or if I'm going to have to take the glove box open and get to it from the side there. One of the two ways is probably how I'll do it. Well, I can't hardly tell if the, hopefully the focus is good on the video camera here, but I'm laying on my back underneath the dash here. There is actually a generous amount of room here to remove these clocks here, and it is definitely a couple of nuts. Just the one up at about the 2 o'clock position, and one maybe the 7, 8 o'clock position down lower a little bit there. I don't know how well it's going to show up for you, but power supply, I can't get my hands on it from here, but that's power supply right there clearly. And then a peanut bulb for lighting in the back. So, should be pretty easy. Let's hope that I don't just jinx myself right there, but this should be a lot smaller scale than removing the rear end of your car and replacing the pinion seals, that's for sure. Anyway, let's get going on it. So for giggles, we should probably do our due diligence, and as you can see, I've got one terminal of the multimeter on the power terminal there. And if I just touch the ground, there's the old multimeter there, and I'll just touch the other end to something grounding on the car. And there we go, we have power. So that is a hot terminal. We do have power going to the clock. If you didn't, you would have to go back to your fuse block and see if you had power at the fuse block and that you didn't have a blown fuse also. And if your fuse power was good at the fuse block, then you would have to trace your wire and figure out, what to do about getting power to that terminal. But we're already well on our way since we have power at the terminal. I'm just going to pop that little terminal out there and get the clock removed. All right. Hopefully it's showing up, but that's the terminal right there that I just, for power. And I actually pushed it out rather than pulling on the wires, put a screwdriver up there against the end of it and push it out of that terminal rather than pulling on the wires, because they're old wires and we don't want to damage anything, and it just comes out nicer with a screwdriver prying on it. Yes, I did disconnect the power before I did all this. It's just a little bit safer that way so we don't short anything out. And it goes without saying throughout all these videos that probably the best $7 or $8 that you can invest when you're doing this car work is getting a quick disconnect of some kind on your battery, because I am constantly going back and forth and disconnecting the battery to work for safety. And it just keeps you from accidentally draining your battery down during all this other stuff. So if I haven't said it, now's the time to say it. You must go get a quick disconnect terminal for your battery while you're doing all this work there. It just makes things a lot nicer. All right, well, let's get to removing the nuts to the clock and seeing if it'll just come right on out easily. Let's hope so. So then you remove the peanut bulb there, and it's just like all the others here. That type of connection is the standard that they use for almost every little peanut bulb in there, and they just grab the housing in the back and pull it out. So now let's start removing those nuts, and they are 3/8 nuts, in case anyone's curious. And a 1/4-inch socket drive with an extension on it makes it pretty easy to get to those nuts, so I'll have those off in a moment here. Okay, and that's the clock unit out. Just 2 nuts that hold it on, and it, you pull it from the underside of the dash backwards. It does not come out forward from the dash, it comes out from behind. But that's the unit, and now let's take it someplace clean and dry and nice, and get a 6-volt battery hooked up to it and start playing around with this and see if we can take it apart further and get it cleaned up. I guess I should also say one other pointer is that it is so much easier to get behind the dash when you can just lay flat on your back with this generous amount of room with the seat bent back there, or not bent back, but taken off. So, I mean, you could definitely take the clock out without having the seat gone. But I think if you're going to be doing any kind of dash work, or you think you have several things to get done within the dash, it probably is worth the time to go ahead and get the seat bolts removed and tip it back. That was very, very easy removal and just a lot more pleasant overall. So recommend taking out the seat. Well, how nice is this working on a desktop on the inside? Warm and clean, how great. So I'm starting to look this clock over. There's some cool parts about this here. So, right there, very cool. December 27th, 1949. Haven't identified what manufacturer of clock it is. I can see there's a couple of little dented in parts right there, one on one side, one on the other. That's probably the only thing keeping the front bezel, chromey piece on there, and that can be cleaned up. As I am now able to kind of move this around in the light, I don't know if it will show up at all on the camera here or not, but I think I can almost make up what the manufacturer is. Okay, there we go. New Haven. So this is a New Haven clock and watch company. It's got the patent number. Well, that's interesting. It says G&D right there for ground. I didn't take any ground wire off of this clock. So, that may be a big part or a big reason why the clock was not working, is that there was 0 ground on the clock. I'm not sure. Or it may have been relying on the grounding by the nuts here on the side. I'm not exactly sure. This will be interesting. But that is definitely a threaded, I don't know if it's going to show up here or if I can focus in on it well enough for you guys here, but there is definitely a spot, at least, to ground a little better. Interesting. Well, I think I'm going to get on the internet again here. There's a couple of other places I saw where it's not video demonstrated, but it's textually documented what you can do to kind of get in here and clean up these clocks. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to start up with just some general cleanup on the dirt on the exterior here. So I'm going to bend these little tabs back here. There's a few crimp spots all the way around the bezel here. Put a mark there with a Sharpie so I know where it's going to go back when I reassemble it. Well, let's get the bezel off here, and it says here another source that those 2 Phillips head screws probably have to come off in order to get the guts of the clock exposed. And I've been I may be able to get to it better once I have it more apart, but I did I think that's glass actually on the inside there all the way around, so I've took a Q-tip down there and tried to clean that up a little bit better. But anyway, time to bend the bezels, tabs back, and undo the screws and see if we can get to the guts of the clock. It was shedding a lot of dirt on the kitchen table here, so I've moved now to a catch pan just so I can get some of the dust and if I drop a screw or something like that, maybe it'll stay there. So right here are the two comically small little bitty screws that were here and here on the bezel. Just undoing the crimps alone here are not enough to remove everything, because I'm being very sensitive to the fact that there is a that's the set screw and other adjusting components right there, and those are through the glass there, so I need to be a little bit careful. But it does look, I'll have to put the camera down when I do it, but that I should be able to lift this up and out. I'll try to do it here while I've got it videoing. Okay, so I was able to do it videotaping, but yeah. There you go. Very good. Okay, so let's move on to the next parts, and I got my mark on here, so I'll know exactly how to put this back on when it's done. And so as I'm playing around with this, I can see that there is a little bit of a gasket here, which I probably will just leave on there. Something else to notice is that this is now very, very loose, and if I was to one hand and pick this up here, I'll do this just for you guys. I don't like doing it, but just because I want to show. So you can see if I move that around that I'm actually moving the interior of the clock hands, but that adjustment screw right there is still attached and all the way through. So I'm going to try to do the work here with it just laying face down here. That's the set screw right here passing through, and I would like to leave that actually in place without becoming a New Haven clock mechanic here. I don't want to dissect the entire clock. I just want to get to the windings and to the lubrication points and see if I can just leave it as is and then get it up and running again. So we'll be a little bit cautious and probably just work with the clock face down here as much as possible to keep everything oriented. Well, I wish I could have caught it a little better for you, but I'll describe what I did. Was I took my battery here, 6-volt battery, pay no attention to the colors of the wire, but positive to positive. There's a ground screw right there to ground screw, and kind of did the hold charge kind of tap. And I believe that wound up kind of setting the winding. This arm right here, which does move back, is part of the winding mechanism, I believe, and I could move that a little bit there, but I moved that a little bit, gave the clock a little bit of a tapping just to kind of get it going, and as you can see, it is still winding down, which I think it takes about 2 minutes for that to happen, supposedly. So I'm going to go ahead and let this keep winding down here because I think it's good to exercise it. I'm having trouble, you know, this is small and this is kind of a finer movements on these wheels, so I may have to watch this for a while to figure out if there's certain areas in here that I want to try to maybe lubricate. To be honest, the entire interior was already very clean. And this is functioning, this is winding down, so I don't know if there's going to be a lot of benefit in getting some clock oil which I do have because of other projects that we do here, but I'll find some spots there that maybe need to be lubricated. I'll put just a little bit of clock oil on there, but all in all, that's pleasing because it is doing what it's supposed to do, which is wind down. So let's let it do its thing. See if it eventually stops, and maybe do a few more periods of just winding up and winding down just to exercise it, and then see if we can get it assembled again and have the same process repeat where I'll go ahead and put a charge across the field windings to get it partially wound, and then go from there. And the more I think about it, there it just stopped actually, so that was the end of that. Alright, I think I've got this thing pretty much sorted out here. So before I move on to showing you how the clock winds and how it recharges and how it basically works, I'm going to do one more thing just to show you, just to make it a little bit, I think, safer to work on here. So this, as you can see, it's just pivoting, kind of killing me here, on that pass-through there that goes through the front for adjusting your clock. That's the knob in there that you can do to do some time setting and adjustment. And though it's probably not a huge amount of pressure and it's probably fine, I just don't like that all the weight of this mechanism is kind of hanging on that pin right there. So I'm going to take a Q-tip here and I'm just going to kind of put this under to support it a little bit so that it isn't just waggling around freely. All right. And now we'll get on to the business at hand, which is, how does this little booger work? Well, let's start by the winding. So the winding itself is can be done. It's kind of a mechanical wind, really. You can do it by hand here, or you can use the field windings and the battery power to do it. I mean, that's how it works, kind of in the vehicle. But let's go ahead and I will show you what it looks like now that it's run down. So this guy right here, and it has a counterpart, you can see it on the other side there, is the winding arm that you might have seen referred to in other texts or internet lookups. So it winds in this direction. I guess you could say, if you were looking at the clock counterclockwise, but I'm just going to go ahead and do it while we're looking at it here. So I'm going to pull it over. Hear that ratcheting? That's as far as it goes, and I'm going to release it. So the clock is actually wound right now, but nothing is happening. There's a little bit of stiffness in the mechanism. It's just not able to fire off that easily on its own. I probably do need to put a little bit of oil in here. But I'm going to give it a little bit of help here just by, that's the balance wheel there. Did you see how I just gently touched it and got it rocking? Just a little gentle touch there is all it took. All right. So now it is running like a clock should. Okay, that's great. We've got a mechanical winding going. This winding arm is ticking down, tick, 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 tick. It's actually moving in this direction ever so slowly. And what will happen, and I'm going to get my light here to kind of show you this. I'll see if I can focus in on it. That right there, let me see what we can do in terms of focus. I'll probably lose it here in a bit, but I'll try. Do you see right there in about the center of your screen, there is a contact point there that I've cleaned up already with some sandpaper. I'll go ahead and focus in on it more, even if I lose focus. There it went, but right there, that's a contact. It has a corresponding contact on the other side. I know I lost you there, but let me go ahead and focus in on it. But you can kind of see it right there in the center of your screen. It just blurred out a little bit here. If I put my light down, you'll probably lose it a little bit, but I'll try to touch it nonetheless here. Let's see if I can do both at the same time here. So, right there. Right there. That is the other contact face, right there. You can see, gosh, my hand's shaking all over the place here, but okay. So, those contacts have importance. So, as this clock is running down, we've wound it. We gave it its kind of initial winding. And I think that initial winding is supposed to happen purely electrically, meaning you can do that thing that you'll hear in your manual where you'll tap or scratch or, your negative terminal to your battery connection. See if you get a spark. Do it again, and if there's no spark, well, what you're doing is that hopefully that there's some, if you look down and peer inside here, you can see there's some copper windings inside there. You create a field, and it's supposed to pull this arm over and give your clock its initial winding, at least the starting winding. And it'll run for a while like that. I mean, apparently the clock isn't so badly out of lubrication, as you can hear it and see it right there. That balance wheel is doing what it should do, just like on a pocket watch or any watch. It's ticking along there, doing its best as it can. I think if you were to rate that wheel and that wire on there, this would be kind of coarse. I've seen finer watches, that have much better mainsprings on them and have a much wider travel on the wheel, an arc, and that's an improvement. But what I want you to notice, though, is that gap right there between the contacts has been kind of getting closer and closer and closer. And eventually, when this winds down, yikes, I just lost you again. Sorry, guys. I'm looking at the contacts. I shouldn't be. You would be interested in seeing this. Eventually, when it gets wound down enough, I can see them getting closer and closer and closer, that contact is going to snap closed. Snap. That will complete the circuit, and if we had it hooked up with electricity to the to the negative ground and the positive there, while it makes contact, it's supposed to pull that winding arm back over and repeat the cycle. So if you can picture it, this clock is going to go through cycle after cycle of dink right there. That just happened. So what would happen if it was in the car and working? It would, I'll back up here, have enough juice and magnet to pull this back, like I just did, and repeat the cycle. Okay. I get it. I get it. So the problem is once you have it installed, you can't get to any of these parts here. The clock does have to work pretty fluidly. We have to have, I guess, a smooth enough mechanism and a strong enough coil and everything to pull that winding arm back to do the initial winding. And your balance wheel right down there, and the pivots and everything have to be loose and lively enough that it will go ahead and just naturally start ticking practically on its own. Now, I'm sure that while it's wound, believe it or not, I know you can, because there's friction in place here, but while it's been wound like that, if you were to tap, smack, kind of dink on the side of the clock there, that often is enough just to get that wheel going, and you can get your clock working. And once it's ticking like that, off of the initial winding, if you have juice powered to it, and if those contacts there are making good contact, it hopefully can repeat that cycle again and again to snap closed, pull the winding, and repeat. And then, yeah, right. And when it breaks open, those points pull open again. Yeah, it just kind of keeps repeating again and again and again. So those contacts matter. It is that snap, that close between the two of them that causes the winding to happen again, and the cycle will repeat. I saw other references on the internet and other places like that when your battery winds, when your car battery, I should say, goes down completely, those contacts kind of close, but they never really separate, and maybe you get some arcing and some other stuff like that, and they get blackened, and they don't really work very well anymore. And certainly, if those contacts aren't making good closure to the circuit, you're not going to get a winding happening again. But I would say that right there explains how these clocks work. So my job is to make sure that the contacts work, to make sure that I'll hook up the battery to the clock here and see if I can get it to go through a few cycles of snapping the contacts close, the field windings having enough juice to pull this kind of square winding arm back, and rewind the clock so that it can wind down again. If it doesn't do that, then I'll have some problems. That means either the wire windings in there are too weak
or there's too much friction to get the winding arm pulled back, or there may be too much friction within the rest of the train, the wheels and the pivots and the other things in there. A lot of the gears that you're seeing have are not necessarily as important as that balance wheel is right there, and the other gear and pivot coming off of it. So lubrication probably does matter to a certain degree for how well this clock is going to work, and it's definitely going to matter on those windings. So I'll have to play around with this for a little bit. I'll probably do that off camera to see if I can get it to go through a full cycle of running down, closing the contacts, and then rewinding the clock. Okay, so by the physical winding of it and by getting the wheel going, my clock fortunately had enough lubrication or enough movement left in the train, even without lubrication, because I haven't lubricated anything, to get the point where the contacts there would snap closed. It's supposed to run for about 2 minutes after the contacts snap close, I think. That would be on a new clock with really lubricated gears and balanced wheel and everything. Mine runs for about 5 seconds, 6 seconds after that. So it really does need some help in terms, I think, of lubrication and liveliness of the whole mechanism to be able to run correctly. You understand if the train and the wheel and the movement is so gummed up and tight that you never get to the point where that contact snaps close, your clock can be hooked up to all the electricity you want. It will never wind again. It has to at least be able to wind down well enough to get to contact close to stand a chance of using the magnet power to redo the arm, rewind the clock, which I'm about to test right now. I've got my contacts down there. I've gently, while it was open, now I use sandpaper, which is probably heresy in the clock world there because little bits of grit can come off. A file would have been much more appropriate, a little jeweler's file, a little small thing. Not that little brass shavings or contact shavings are great for your clock either, but I was very carefully to put a Q-tip underneath here and wipe away anything that I found that came off underneath there. So the contact has been cleaned up. I have power with hopefully positive to the battery, and a negative, and that's my negative terminal there. So hopefully with the contact closed, I'll be able to just kind of knock and brush around and get this to redo the winding on the clock. Trying. Did you see it? There. See how it moves back there? Just enough. Just enough to get it going. So it's working. Now if I were to hook it back up, will it stay working? No, it didn't keep going. Alright, let's try this again. No. So even though it's a 6-volt battery, it's not the same 6-volt battery that's on the car. And when I make the connection there, you can see that it struggles, that little square right there. Watch that winding arm right there. When I make contact, it will try to go over. It just can't go over very far. That was pretty good. And I'll release it. So it's been wound. But you notice that it didn't start ticking automatically either. And that's probably a matter of the lack of lubrication in the train. And if I was to tap on it, that freed it up enough, so to speak. Do you see it? It's ticking again. So probably exercising this clock like I've been doing, because I promise you just a moment ago I touched the 6-volt supply to it. It did not pull that arm far enough back to break the contact right there and kind of wind the clock. So perhaps with a little bit more exercise here, and then I'm going to start finding my lubrication points here, I can feel good enough about actually reassembling the clock, putting it back in the car, doing the kind of initial winding to it. I may even have to tap the clock just to get it started, but I think once it's going and once it's kind of starting through its cycles, it may run longer term. But of course, every time I disconnect the battery, the clock winds down, and you have to kind of be cognizant of the issues you have with your clock, the mechanical winding that's going on here, and hooking your car battery back up there. It does matter to a certain degree in terms of getting the winding going. But again, hopefully I can get it, if I get this lubricated and cleaned up well enough, that just that any kind of winding of the clock manually will be enough to get the train to start running just by itself, or maybe just a little bit of help from a tap. And then if you keep your battery connected, it'll run through those cycles indefinitely. So I kind of looked over the mechanism, and just like most clock makers, clock repair people, everyone does, they all have ultrasonic cleaners. I have an ultrasonic cleaner for other small fine parts. And yeah, we're going to go ahead, and I've just kind of set down the guts of it down into the ultrasonic cleaner. That'll be the best way to get all the old grime, any old oil, and clean it up well. And we'll see if it runs a little better after a good cleaning. So the dunk in the ultrasonic cleaner did what I had hoped it would do, which was has improved the running mechanism by quite a bit. I haven't even oiled it. I've just literally, this was just an ultrasonic cleaning, which is able to get in between all those plates and gears and shafts and everything around there better than what you can to remove residual oils and gunk and dust and other things like that. And so now with just a manual winding and without even setting the wheel in motion, it just starts to run on its own. So I will still go ahead, and then I will do a little bit of oiling on the parts that I can get to, which are like the shafts for here on this balance wheel, and a few of the other finer movements here. Anywhere I can get to with just a little bit of oil. And it's not 3-in-1 oil, or it's a clock oil. It's supposed to be the kind that doesn't gum up over time, and it takes a scant amount. I mean, literally, like this is your oiler with just a drop in it. My son's been doing some clock work and watch work, and I'm lucky to have access to an ultrasonic cleaner and to a little bit of oil from here. But I haven't even oiled it, and it's running a lot better. And what I'll be curious to see is after that contact finally does snap close right there, a lot will be told about how good the cleaning was. There it is. Once that closes up, how long it runs after the contacts have closed. That'll tell me if the cleaning did a significant job in allowing it to run a little bit longer. If I oil it after that, it will run even better and even longer, and I can probably hook up the little 6-volt battery here and see if we can go through a few cycles of it actually running like it's supposed to. Well, this is good. I had to go to work, but I had to come back and start working on this immediately. I couldn't stand not to. Oiling a clock is an interesting thing. You do need to oil the pivots where that balance wheel, is ticking around. On this particular clock, the thing that improved the movement and the lubrication and the strength with which it is running. Did you just see that? So a couple times now I've actually had it successfully do the contacts and then pull back open and run again. It kind of depends on how I think I had my hand on the clock before when it would do it, and that would help it twist the arms back without losing some of the momentum from the clock itself twisting. But I have had it go through a couple of cycles now where it's actually closed that gap right there down, and the circuit gets closed and the magnet gets activated, and it winds itself again. So it's very cool. But as I was saying, the main shaft in the middle, once I got that lubricated with a little bit of oil, that seemed to make a big world of difference. The spring that drives this, and I'm going to go ahead and just disconnect the power right here, at least the electrical power. Where'd it go? I want to show it to you. There we go. I'll try to focus in on it. See that spring right there? When you wind the clock, so to speak, right there, by going left with it, it's that spring that I just showed you that is pulling it back and provides all the spring tension for the clock to keep running mechanically. There's a pivot, the main shaft, that runs right through the center. That shaft has to be very well lubricated because it's not a strong spring. It can't handle a lot of resistance on the main shaft running through. And friction is the enemy of these clocks. So the trick is to put just as little oil as you need in only the places that it needs to be, like on the top and bottom of where the staff is on this balance wheel. Same thing on that gear train right there. Just minimal oil. And once you've got it running like this, where you can wind it and it will run all the way through the cycle, you're doing pretty good. And this is a weak battery. I think when it's hooked into the car, I'll get a very, very strong, full zoink pull left. A good field will be set up, and it will do a good full wind on it. But I like the way it's running right now. And this isn't even clocks are somewhat positional, meaning it's not meant to run on its face. The clock is meant to run in this position, and it may actually run even a little bit better, so to speak, because of the way that the balance wheel there is on its side. So anyway, I'm pleased with that. I think I'm going to go ahead and put this together and see if we can't get it back in the car, and if we can get it to run. Okay, I've got everything working now. Also, I've tested this against the 6 volts of the car battery versus that little battery there, and of course the car battery that has much more power than the lantern battery does an excellent job of winding the clock up, so it fully winds it whenever you hook it up to electricity off of a big 6-volt car battery. Some other points to talk about on these old Buick clocks. So right down underneath, I'm going to try to zoom in on it, I lost it. Underneath that time set pull-up knob there, you see that slit right there in that ring, and you see the graduations underneath there for faster and slower, and then the glass is a little hazy. There's even a little marking pin down there to help you kind of keep track of where you're at. That is the fine adjustment on one of these clocks for having them run a little faster or a little slower, to try to help regulate them. I can also assure you 100%, I can't do it one-handed, but you'll just have to trust me. That set knob right there is geared to the exact same gearing right here as this screw slot is on the back here. You can see, it may show up, it may not, but there's fast and slow scribed into this backing plate there. The two are the same, they're linked together. What it does is it affects the, without getting too technical, the throw on this wheel to the ratchet action for how long the wheel is going to oscillate between ticks. So sorry for all the clock geniuses out there. I said that very poorly, but we really don't have time in the video to go through an entire mechanical watch movement overview. There's a lot of those that are out there if you want to learn that. But it is a truly mechanical clock at the end of the day, with spring-loaded winding. Not a barrel wraparound spring kind, but more of a pull circular spring, but it gets the job done. With a balance staff and a wheel right there, just like you would have on a pocket watch movement. And so let's talk a little bit about what it took to get this back. So cleaning is important. The ultrasonic cleaner does a very, very good job. That was naphtha that I was using. You will not find consensus on the internet anywhere on how to clean and how to work on clocks. It would be ideal, in an ideal world, you could take this entire mechanism apart, clean every part of them individually in an ultrasonic cleaner, and then reassemble them. That would give the clock the best chance in terms of its accuracy and its movement. However, there's also a good chance you will never get your clock put back together unless you do it routinely. Then there's the other talk that you will see about blasting these with cleansers. You don't blast these. Don't do that. The naphtha ultrasonic cleaner that I did, where I kept it all assembled, did exactly what it was supposed to do. Is I wanted to strip all of the oil and all of the gunk that I could off of the clock movement. But you also have to understand that a clock does not run when it's dry. All clocks need oiled. And oiling is another perennial argument debate that you will see on the internet. How do you oil a clock? The best way is to get an oil that you apply only to the parts that need to be oiled. Great spots, and it's going to be so hard for me to show this to you, but right on top here, you'll see where there's a shaft that runs through that balance wheel. Right there at the top and right there at the bottom is a great spot to apply a very sparing amount of oil. Any other shaft you see that has a kind of bearing surface up here at the top? Try again. It's about as good as I'm going to do for you, like right there. And underneath. Those are great. However, you do not soak the entire mechanism in oil. The oil is always another raging debate. There are clock oils out there. Go ahead and buy some clock oil and use it on those fine points there. People will talk about using synthetic motor oils as well. Those are oils that lubricate and tend to not break down. It's not clock oil. And you'll never get anyone to agree on what is the right way or the perfect oil to use. But if I want to also bring up that on the very center of here, this was very important for the winding of the clock. There's a shaft right in the middle, and it has if you get into there, you'll find a top and a bottom to it, and points that need to be lubricated. That's where you put your oil. You do not need to apply any lubricant, for instance, to the gear surfaces, though. Those can be left clean, dry, and dust-free. And that's what it took to get this clock, after I was done cleaning it, back to oiled and able to freely move again. And this is the goal, that you can just wind it and then, without doing anything, I didn't even have to jostle the clock. It went ahead and started activating the balance wheel. Remember that those contacts right there are important. When those snap shut, that gives you that brief moment where the windings, let's see if I can show them to you. There, you can see them, sorry. There you go, classic, windings around a shaft, creating a field, creating a magnetic pull, and it pulls the winding arm to the side, just like that. It has to be lubricated, it has to be free, it has to work well, and outside, without any electricity, you should be able to just pull it right over like I do and have it start ticking away. And it should run all the way down until those points right there collapse and touch. And it should continue to run actually past that. Maybe it'll run for like about, I think when it was brand new, maybe it would run for like a minute or 2 minutes past that. And it's just waiting then for the electricity to be applied to it to then magnetically twist the winding arms around there and repeat the cycle. So that's what it takes. You can see from here, this shaft right here, when you pull on the other side of the clock there, these teeth pull down, they engage that gear, and then you can adjust your clock. That's all you're really doing. When you pull that knob, and it's kind of clunky, a lot of times when you pull that knob, you'll feel that the teeth quite aren't aligned, and then you just twist it a little bit, and all of a sudden you feel the whole knob on the front give and go a little bit further out towards you. That's just because those teeth right there and there have finally aligned, and while you're twisting, you will actually be adjusting the clock. And if you choose to work on it like I've been working on it here, where I left it on the shaft, just be careful. You can see how this is kind of flopping around there. There's hands on the other side there, and they do move. This whole thing in there, I'm moving it around. So if you smack it and drop it, you risk damaging your little arms in there. So anyway, I think that's pretty well demystified the clock on these things. I'm going to go ahead and get mine assembled before I do something like drop it and break it, and then we'll get it back into the car. One last point to bring up when I now go to reinstall this. I've been kind of cheating while I've been doing my testing. This grounding lug back here is not part of the installation with the car. There never was a ground from here to the car. It is done entirely by the contact that is made from these tabs here to the body of the car. So when I go to reinstall that, I will be taking some sandpaper and probably cleaning that up a little bit and making sure that the bolt and nut are nice and tight on there, because that is actually part of our electrical connection. And if that part fails, then the clock will not wind, it will not run. So that'll be part of my installation. Okay, clock is back installed in the car. So over here, you probably, just kind of like the manual talks about, when you go to reconnect your battery, you might actually see a little spark in between here because it's hooked up, it's live. So let's see if it shows. Not really. Didn't see one. But anyway, let's see if we've got enough going there that I can hear the clock running. I'm trying to be quiet. I think you can hear that, can't you? Okay, so we've got it wound. Now let's hook up the battery and it should just keep running. All right. We've been running for probably about 10-15 minutes so far. I'd say I didn't time it, but let me guess, maybe 3-4 minutes on a winding. I forget how. I never did time the cycle to it. I suppose if I sat here and listened, you could almost probably hear the ka-chunk when the contacts touch and the winding
kind of redoes itself. But there it is. I can definitely hear it ticking right along here. So as long as you keep the battery hooked up, of course, it'll just keep on going until probably those contacts, which I did see one cycle off the battery. I was a little surprised at just how big the spark was when those contacts touched and opened apart there. So definitely over time, those contacts are going to kind of suit up and get marred, and will need to be touched up again. But we'll see how long it runs. I have no idea if it's going to be accurate or not. I can tell you in pretty good confidence from I have a friend who has helped me much with learning about clocks and watches and just many other things, that these clocks were probably never incredibly accurate, at least not by like pocket watch, railroad watch standards by any means. But they kept reasonable time, and you could just reset them as frequently as you needed to, and help you keep track of where you are in your day. So anyway, that's very pleasing. Tick, tick, tick. All right, that's a success. Now, radio. That'll be coming in the next one, I guess, and this one may be interesting. So let's hope it goes well.